My War with the United States by Ludwig Bemelmans. Please don't shoot. Oswego is on Lake Ontario. It is a small town without tall buildings. There is one hotel, the Pontiac, a streetcar, also a theater, in which the Paulist choirists sang yesterday. The town is very friendly. The air is strong and clear. We are stationed out at Fort Ontario. The grounds of this fortress are spacious. There is an immense parade ground. The field hospital, Unit N, to which I belong, was recruited in New York. The men are all volunteer soldiers, and the officers doctors. The men are mostly college students or graduates, not ordinary privates. Some of them are older and professional men. For example, the one who has his bed next to mine in the barracks is a professor of French at one of the large universities. It is either Harvard or Yale, I believe. His name is Beardsley. I am very glad of his friendship. He seems to take the whole business we are engaged in as if it did not concern him, as a vacation, never has a serious thought. He takes a particular pride in having a very ill-fitting uniform and hat. These military hats are badly enough designed as they are, but he fixes his own so that the rim runs up off his face, which makes him look very inefficient. Also, he shaves only when he has to. Mostly he sits on his bed and eats a peculiar kind of small white nuts and crosses his legs. All this is so fine because he is a man of great culture, and I like him so because I have to think how unbearable a German professor would be here next to me. In the evening, Beardsley looks like a Mexican bandit. He makes no effort to be assigned to better jobs, to win a promotion. He could even have a commission for the asking, but he is happy, and most so when we push the wagon with bread from the bakery to the barracks every evening. Then he sings and says this is the best time he has ever had, that he is completely happy. Perhaps he has been in some terrible life, and now feels happy because he is away from that. He tells me that Schopenhauer states with authority that happiness is the absence of unhappiness, which is so obvious and foolish that backwards child could make that connection, could make this observation. But he says I must think about it. I look this up, and it is right. Only Schopenhauer says the absence of Schmerz, which is pain, and in German the word pain covers more than just pain. It means sorrow, trouble, unhappiness. So Professor Beardsley is perhaps right. They allowed me to bring my dog along. The major said to the adjunct back in New York City, "Say, Charlie, he has a dog. Can we use a dog?" The adjunct asked, "What kind of a dog is it?" I said, "A police dog." I should do him in a German accent. "A police dog?" Then he leaned back and said to the major, "It's all right with me." "All right, son, bring your police dog," said the major. "What's his name?" I am glad of this yet. I have never seen anything like it. I cannot think of a German major calling his adjunct Charlie and asking him about the dog. And all this time the major sat in a chair and told me to sit down, and the adjunct had his legs on the major's desk. The major smoked a cigar and smiled, and then talked to me in German about beer and food. He also said how much he enjoyed a trip down the Rhine. We drill here all day long, and working men are building new barracks and fixing the old ones up. There is a colonel here from the regular army, a smart-looking old gentleman with white hair and a trim, well-kept body. He wears boots and spurs and behaves like an officer. The men tell me that these are West Pointers, and you can always tell them, no matter how old they are. We are being instructed how to take care of the sick, how to transport men on stretchers, first aid, and how to help in a hospital. In our free time, we go to motion pictures and entertainments for the soldiers. One is as dull as the other. On Sundays we go to church, and afterwards people ask us to their houses for dinner. In all these houses is a soft, warm feeling, a desire to be good to us. And the food is simple, good, and plentiful. We also take walks together, and Beardsley has pointed out a piece of scenery which he named Beautiful Dreck. It was a bitter landscape composed of railroad tracks, signal masts, coal sheds, a factory building and some freight cars, a gas tank, and in the background some malfunctioning plant, black with soot, Some of the windows of this building were lit by a vivid gray-blue light, and yellow flames shot out of several chimneys. "That is," he said, "beautiful dreck, and we have lots of it in America. Dreck is a German word for filth and dirt, but it also means manure, mud, dirty fingers. It is a large, able word. Patois, almost bad. It covers all that was before us, and therefore thereby can be seen that Professor Beardsley knows much. He told me St. Louis had a particularly good portion of beautiful dreck, but that the best he knew could be seen in the Jersey meadows, where it covers almost the whole countryside. One day, the ward-master of Ward Number 3 swam too far out into Lake Ontario and drowned, and I became the ward-master. This ward was filled with old-time soldiers. They called themselves old-timers, and had recently been with Mr. Pershing in Mexico. They were distinguished from all other soldiers in that they had overcoats and uniforms of what they called old issue, a cloth of much better quality than the new, and also better of color, and they were very proud of khaki uniforms that were almost white from much wear and bleaching. These uniforms, of course, they did not wear. They hung in their closets. They were middle-aged men, and those in our ward suffered from some amorous diseases, which they mentioned with pride, considering those who did not have either the disease or the memory of it not quite complete soldiers. Among my duties was to give them their medicine, to take pulse, temperature, and respiration, and the difficult job of turning the lights out at 9 o'clock. They read, played cards, talked, and did not want to go to sleep. All objects they used had to be sterilized. I had to wear rubber gloves most of the time. The first few nights after I took charge, I said, "Lights out!" when it was 9, turned the lights out, and went to the room outside, where I wrote out reports. But I could see they turned the lights on again as soon as I was out of the room. This worried me a great deal, because lights out means lights out, and there must be discipline in the army. I could not understand that these men who were old-timers did not understand that in Germany this would have been unthinkable. The third night I intended to do something about it. I walked into the room and waited until it was 9. Then I turned out the light but did not go out. One of the men next to the light said, "Hey, buddy, turn on that light like a good boy." I told him I was not a good boy, but a ward-master in charge, and that the orders were to turn the lights out. "That's right," said the old-timer, "but it doesn't say you can't turn them on again." Then another shouted, "Turn on that light, Heine!" Then one of them came in his pajamas and turned on the light, pushing me against the wall, and they all laughed. When he was back in bed, I turned the light out again, and at that moment every one of them threw something at me, even 2 glass ducks, which is the name for the watering bottles. I ran over to the barracks and got my Colt 45, strapped it around myself, and then I came back to the room with the gun in my hand. I told them I would turn the lights out again, and the first man who would come near me, get out of bed, or even make a noise, would be shot. I turned out the lights again. It was about 10 o'clock. They howled with joy. Threw all the rest of the things they had not thrown before, and I shot twice into the room over their heads. As yet, I did not want to hurt any of them, but I would have shot the first man who came near me. There was silence after this, and then people came running, nurses, orderlies, patients from the other wards. The officer of the day, he took my gun away from me and told me to consider myself under arrest and go to my barracks. The next day at 10 o'clock, an orderly told me to come to headquarters and see the colonel. Most of the officers were in this room. I saluted in correct military fashion according to their rank, first the colonel, then the major, the captain after, and lastly 2 first lieutenants, each with a click of the heels and a slight bow from the waist, which was both elegant and correct, and as I had seen the German officers do. The colonel sat behind a desk. He was the very little man who always made speeches about an irrigation project in some country with malaria, which he had been responsible for. I think it was Manila, but we heard this speech so often that I have forgotten just where it was. He started to say, looking out the window, the basic function of a hospital, Private Bemelmans, is to cure men, not to shoot them." Then he turned around and laughed and asked me to tell them how it happened. They laughed loud when I told them, and said that after all I had done the right thing, in intention, that is. They agreed that discipline is the first requisite of an army, and when I informed them that either one had to enforce it or leave it alone, and let the patients run the hospital, they nodded and laughed some more. And the colonel said that he thought I would do more good to the service if I were outside the hospital on guard, since obviously I was a military man and not suited to ward duty. My gun was on his desk all this time. He gave it back to me and said, "But please don't shoot." And then he said that he would take care that I was transferred to the guard. From then on, he, the colonel, and all the officers smile when they see me, and it makes me mad. But apparently there is no room for me on the guard as yet, and Beardsley and I have no particular assignment except to drill with Captain Pedley. He is a fine man. He has a likeness of President Wilson on account of his teeth. And while he is not a military man, he is not altogether so foolish and amateurish as most of the others are when they drill us, particularly the fat officers who are squeezed into creaky leather puttees, get out of breath, and are unable to get us back into formation once they have given 2 or 3 commands. The regular army sergeant has to help them, or they dismiss us to make us fall into our original places. Also, they lack that distance which must be in the army, because at rest they talk to the men about all kinds of things, even the movies, and one of them even lay down in the grass with us and picked his teeth while he told us about how he bought a house in Flushing, and all the woodwork was painted. And when he had some of it scraped off, there was some genuine kind of wood under the paint that is very valuable, and how mad it made him that the former owner was so stupid as to cover it up. And now he had to have all the wood scraped. It cost a lot of money. Of course, all the men are from colleges, or as good as he is, but then they are privates now, and he is an officer. He also spoke to me at the time in German. "Why get ist hem?" He said a few sentences like that, and he tells us that he has been in Heidelberg and Vienna, and that the postgraduate courses in Vienna are a fake, but very fine for drinking and girls. Afterwards we drill again. This seems wrong to me. None of these officers can ride, fence, or fight. Most of them wear glasses. Only the colonel is a West Pointer, but he is very old and continually makes speeches, mostly in Oswego, on that irrigation project. And there we will pause.